we're going to get started now.
Yeah. Oh.
My name is Elizabeth Zanet, and I'm a member of the Animal Law Committee at the New York City Bar Association, and I'll be tonight's moderator. On behalf of the committee, I'd like to welcome you to our program on the Champions, an uplifting documentary film about the pit bulls who were rescued from the dogfighting operation perpetrated by Michael Vick. The film tells a story of the rescue and rehabilitation of the pit bulls. It also examines certain themes that surround pit bulls in general. One of those themes is the bad reputation that pit bulls have suffered for many decades in the United States, despite the fact that they were once considered friendly, easygoing, all-American family dogs. You will see in the film the consequences of that undeserved reputation, including laws that ban pit bulls from living in certain jurisdictions in the United States. In New York State, though such breed discrimination laws are not allowed, there are restrictions on where pit bulls and other large dogs can live. This is in part the reason why pit bulls are overrepresented in many of the state's animal shelters, including New York City's Animal Care and Control Center. That brings me to our program speaker. I am very happy to introduce Mitzi Bolanos, who will be speaking to us about the impact of breed discrimination laws on pit bulls. Mitzi is an attorney and the executive director of StubbyDog, an all-volunteer nonprofit organization working to change the public perception of pit bulls and pit bull-type dogs, and dismantle the associated stereotypical thinking. Growing up in Miami-Dade County, where pit bulls have been banned since 1989, Mitzi initially knew very little about these dogs. After law school, Mitzi moved to New Orleans, where she met Bubba, the pit bull who would take her down a path of fighting against breed discrimination and eventually up to Portland, Oregon, to pursue an advanced degree in animal law at Lewis and Clark Law School. Now they take on breed discrimination together and help spread the message that pit bulls are loving family companions. Mitzi and Bubba currently live in Anchorage, Alaska, where he is the proud big brother to 3 other rescued pups. Please welcome Mitzi.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm excited to be here and to see so many people in the audience here to watch the Champions and to learn about these amazing dogs. I want us to get to the film, so I'm going to jump right in. I'll give you a brief overview of breed-specific legislation, how we got here, and how we can continue to make progress and move forward. So I'll start off by introducing you to Gigi. In many ways, it's because of the victory dogs who we'll meet in the film that Gigi was allowed a new start. So she's one of the Missouri 500, which are the 500 dogs rescued from the largest dogfighting raid in U.S. history. It was in 2009, so just a couple of years after the Vick case. She is today a certified therapy dog, and I love how tiny she looks with her golden retriever friends. She gets to spend her days, a couple days a week at the VA hospital in San Diego, and she does wonderful work there. But because she's a pit bull, there's still hundreds of cities and towns across this country where Gigi isn't welcome. And not because she's done anything wrong, but because she meets this set of physical characteristics that we've been taught to fear. This is a heartbreaking quote. It's from an animal control director in Prince George's County, just outside of DC, that has a long-standing pit bull ban. And he says, "The hardest thing we have to do is to go to someone's house, knock on their door, see their pit bull laying in the living room, watching TV with the kids, and take that dog away. A dog that's done nothing wrong, caused no problems, but just because of his breed." And really, it's just because of the way he looks. And that's what breed-specific legislation is about. And breed-specific legislation is a bit of a misnomer because there's nothing specific about these laws. So we're talking about banning a type or a look of dog. So these laws will say things like, any dog that has the appearance or the characteristics of these breeds, or any dog commonly known as or commonly referred to as pit bull. So I can find you similar characteristics in anything from a Jack Russell to a Lab. And I can find you, a Boston Terrier just recently in Montreal that was called a pit bull. We're talking a 20-pound little dog. So, we're talking a legal definition here, a definition that in a lot of places literally determines life or death for a family's dog. And we're defining this illegality as something that can be referred to as a pit bull. So we do have a handful of cases that will say, hey, no, this is way too vague for due process. So we have this case out of Massachusetts that says the definition of pit bull in the ordinance, which is devoid of any reference to a particular breed, but relies instead on the even less clear common understanding and usage of the term pit bull, is not sufficiently definite to meet due process requirements. Unfortunately, these cases are in the minority, and most cases have upheld these laws. So how did we get here? How did we get to breed-specific legislation? This is one of my favorite quotes from Judge Green in the Tracy decision out of Maryland. Succumbing to the allure of bad facts leads inevitably to the development of bad law. So proponents of breed-specific legislation will say, well, we have these statistics that say that pit bulls bite more, so we need these laws to keep our communities safe. Well, that's not quite right. What they have is this data set that was compiled from media reports. And the authors of the data set, the Centers for Disease Control and the American Veterinary Medical Association, explicitly said when they published their report that it could not be used to infer breed-specific risk. So one of the researchers said, the whole point of our summary was to explain why you can't do that, but the media and the people who want to support their case just don't look at that. And their reason was that to obtain that kind of risk information, it would be necessary to know the total numbers of each breed currently living in the United States, so we can get a proper ratio, right? Like this population and this percentage of bites. But the main reason really why we shouldn't be looking at that is that it was compiled from media reports. So yeah, the data set shows a higher number of incidents involving pit bull type dogs because the media reports more of these incidents, and the media will call any short-haired, medium to large, broad-shouldered dog a pit bull. So the National Canine Research Council is a great resource. I encourage you guys to check out their website. They have a few media studies where they compare dog bite stories, and it shows the stark difference in the amount of reporting. So for example, we'll have a non-pit bull type dog commit a certain act resulting in certain injury, and we'll have 1 or 2 stories in the local paper. A pit bull type dog commits similar or same act resulting in similar or same injury, and we have hundreds of media stories in print, in cable news networks. So, it's just this huge difference. So that's what people see. So we have, sorry guys. So on the one hand, media overrepresents pit bulls and misidentifies pit bulls. So this media cycle feeds itself. The AVMA warns us that witnesses may be predisposed to assume that a vicious dog is of this type because that's what we continue to see. This is a quote from Barry Glassner's book, The Culture of Fear. He says, "The use of poignant anecdotes in place of scientific evidence, the christening of isolated incidents as trends, depictions of entire categories of people as innately dangerous." So he's talking about people and crime here, but the same phenomenon translates to breed bans. The paranoia spread by the media, the irrational fears, the anecdotes in place of scientific evidence. That's what we see at these council meetings where people are proposing BSL. We're not seeing this fact-based evidence. We're seeing this, oh, but my cousin's friend has this story of this pit bull that once did this. So it definitely translates. So in his book, he describes how the media will report on events that are so statistically unlikely to happen, but they sensationalize this event. They make it seem like it happens all the time. They let emotionally charged testimony completely swallow any objective scientific information, and the fear just spreads throughout the public. So in reality, you're 5 times more likely to be struck by lightning than killed by a dog. But when you look at some of these media reports, I mean, it's like you're in imminent danger with these pit bulls lurking on the streets. I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous. So this is a great quote from the Riddle opinion. We cannot malign a breed of dogs on the basis of rumor and hysteria, which is exactly what has happened, right? So we have these breed-specific laws, we have this media hype, despite the fact that controlled studies have never been able to identify the pit bull type group as disproportionately dangerous. I'm sure many of you have seen the American Temperament Test Society results. We see this in a lot of articles. It's an independent organization, tests thousands of dogs, hundreds of different breeds in a series of situations. These scores are from the 2015 results. 2016 results are pretty similar also. But average score on these temperament tests for all breeds, all dogs, is 83%, which is good. For the common pit bull types, or dogs generally labeled pit bull types because they're big, blocky-headed, broad shoulders, muscular, every single one of these breeds scored above average. Some other common breeds didn't do as well, but that's not to say that one breed group is a good dog and one breed group is a bad dog, or one is better than the other. The point of all this is that these are all relatively good numbers. The truth is that there's actually very little difference in aggression between breeds. The greatest variation is between smaller breeds, which tend to be more aggressive, and larger breeds, which tend to be less aggressive. And when we look at something like this, it's also important to remember that dogs who share a lot of DNA, like siblings from the same litter, can still have very different personalities. So at the end of the day, each dog is an individual, and that's what we need to remember. You know, dogs aren't their breed. Dogs aren't their past. They're not their scars. You know, it's not how they're raised. How many times have we heard that? Oh, if you raise them right, if you get them from a puppy, then they can be good dogs. That's not how they're raised. You know, she wasn't raised to be a therapy dog. You know, the victory dogs who we'll meet in the film pretty soon, they weren't raised to be therapy dogs or even family dogs, but they are. And it's a matter of providing them the space and opportunity to just be themselves. I think it's Little Red's mom in the film who says, Little didn't need to be rehabilitated when she was rescued. She just needed to recover. You know, and that really drives home the fact that these dogs are victims. We don't need to fix them. We just need to let them recover from the trauma that they've experienced. Johnny Justice, who's also in the film, he became a therapy dog and worked in a Paws for Tails program at their local library where kids would read to him. And so there's this amazing line in Jim Goran's book, The Lost Dogs, which is about the victory dogs, and he says, Johnny sat and listened as if he'd never done anything else in his life, as if he'd been bred for the job. He was one of Vic's dogs. He wasn't bred to sit in a library with a bunch of kids. Gigi wasn't bred for that, but it's who they are, and no one can deny them that. No amount of training or abuse can deny these dogs who they are. So we do have some actual statistics to work with, derived from police and animal control reports, not media stories. This fatal dog bite study found that dog bites have several factors in common, and breed was not one of them. Interestingly, the study also found that the breed listed on police and animal control reports often differed from the breed listed in the corresponding media report. So the report concluded what we already knew, right? That breed is irrelevant, and that these are the factors involved in dog bite fatality. So dogs kept on chains, isolated from positive human interactions. These are your yard dogs and your guard dogs. Dogs not neutered. The dog statistically most likely to injure someone is an intact male on a chain, regardless of breed. Owner history of abuse, neglect, and mismanagement, and failure to supervise or intervene when appropriate. So these are sometimes these Facebook videos we see of kids poking eyes and pulling ears and jumping on backs, and we think it's cute, and then the dog all of a sudden snapped and we don't know what happened. Well, there was a failure to teach kids how to properly interact with dogs and to intervene when appropriate. And the major professional organizations agree, they tell us banning a breed, a type, a look of dog is at best just ineffective. They don't keep communities any safer, they don't reduce dog bites, and in practice they cost a lot of money to implement and defend. They encourage ownership by substandard owners, and they're just killing the family dogs. So as more and more states start to realize this, we're seeing preemption laws take hold. There's about 20 states now that prohibit their cities and towns from passing breed-specific legislation. New York is one of them, like Elizabeth mentioned. Arizona just passed theirs in May, so they're the latest one. And then I have these dots on Washington and South Carolina. They don't have preemption laws, but they do have laws that say that you can't declare an animal dangerous solely on breed. So it's a good step. It's not quite a preemption law, but it's a step. And there's international evidence as well. So this is a study in Germany that tested golden retrievers and pit bull types and found no significant difference in aggressive tendencies. It led to the repeal of BSL in this area. Spain has a similar study, came to the same conclusion. Spain still has restrictions, so they don't have a ban, but pit bulls do have to be muzzled in public, and owners have to carry a special insurance. And then this is a Netherlands study. It was commissioned by the government and led to the repeal of a ban. And it says, the view that aggressive potential is linked to breed is of serious concern, as experience, socialization, training, health, and victim behavior all play roles in a dog's potential for aggression. In other words, dogs should be evaluated as individuals. So we know there's no scientific support for the idea that pit bulls are disproportionately dangerous. We know that these laws are ineffective at reducing dog bites and keeping communities safe. So why do people still try to pass these bans? I ask myself this all the time. We have all this evidence. Why is this even still an issue? Why are we still bringing this up? And so I think back in the 80s, we didn't have all of these studies. Communities were cracking down on dog fighting. These dogs were all over the media. The dogs were portrayed as criminals instead of victims. We had judges saying things like this in the 80s. Pit bulls have exceptionally strong bites, possibly twice the strength of bites of other dogs, inherent characteristics of exceptional aggression, athleticism, strength, viciousness, unpredictability, attacking in a berserk and frenzied rage, savage behavior. So I can see in the 80s, before we had all this information, I can see how the bans came to be. I can see how this kind of developed. But today, we know better. Today, there's no excuse. And yet, we have this 2013 case are of the breed that is typically referred to generically as pit bull dogs, which are aggressive by nature, have been known as attack animals with strong, massive heads and jaws, and have been found to represent a public health hazard. There's no excuse for this today, but it's still happening. So here in New York, there's a preemption law. Municipalities can't pass breed discriminatory laws, but that doesn't mean judges don't have biases. Here's an appellate opinion. The condemnation of an individual dog in the context of a dangerous dog proceeding solely by virtue of its breed is without any legal basis. We have repeatedly held that there's no persuasive authority for the proposition that a court should take judicial notice of the ferocity of any particular type or breed of domestic animal. So this was overturning a town court opinion where a pit bull was found dangerous, even though the pit bull was on leash and was attacked by an off-leash dog. And so the woman walking the pit bull was actually pregnant, and the town court made this comment about how we can tell her lack of judgment because she was pregnant and walking this type of dog. So appellate court was not nice to them in their opinion. So I'll wrap up with this. Something really interesting, and they'll talk about it a little bit in the film, I think, is that when you read these police and animal control reports of officers coming into suspected dogfighting operations, and they approach these dogs, the dogs don't, growl or snap or lunge. Some of them cower in fear, but a lot of them still just want safe human touch. Testimony from people who've witnessed dogfighting will say when the survivors pulled from the ring, it's almost like they're relieved to see their owner. And this is the same owner that drugged and brutalized them earlier that day to get them ready for the fight, to make them a buck. So we're talking about dogs who a lot of times have seen the worst of human nature, who have been betrayed over and over again, who have no reason to trust us, and yet they still want to be with us. And not even do they still want to be with us, but they want to heal us. They turn around and become therapy dogs. This is a reading program in Ohio. So, their capacity for forgiveness, for starting over, for unconditional love, it just blows me away every time I think about it. How far these dogs can come and how much they can still trust us. And we talk about these extreme cases, but it's also important to remember that most pit bulls, don't come from these situations and haven't suffered this way. A lot of pit bulls, have lived most of their lives in loving family homes like these guys. And part of our advocacy is to help people see that pit bulls are, at the end of the day, they're just dogs, So about 4 years ago, the people of Miami-Dade County, where I'm from, voted almost 2-1 to keep the pit bull ban in place. So the citizens were in favor of the ban, which to me, since I had already left Miami, was shocking. But thinking about it, it shouldn't have come as a surprise when for the last 3 decades, the citizens have had little to no interaction with pit bulls because of the ban. So all they know of pit bulls is what's in the media or the underground dogs that have happened because of the ban. So it shouldn't have come as a surprise. When I adopted my first pit bull, Bubba, I was living in New Orleans. Friends and family back home told me that I was crazy, and they literally told me that he was going to kill me in my sleep because that's what these dogs do, right? I mean, they lose it. They can be super friendly 1 minute, but they lose it and then they kill people. Yeah. And we're talking about, good people, dog-loving people, smart people, professionals, lawyers. They were telling me these things. And so, I have to think about it. I'm like, you guys are smart. What are you talking about? But this is what they've been taught all their lives, and they have no life experience to make them question what they've been taught, But today, a lot of those same people, I'm happy to say, are advocates. And it only took 2 or 3 visits with Bubba to make them question this long-held belief, to make them say, oh, you're a pit bull? What are these people talking about? So, when people have this image in their minds of a pit bull as this big scary monster, there's no piece of paper or PowerPoint slide or study or statistic that's going to change that. Believing something and knowing something are 2 very different things, and your belief system creates this framework for you. So any new information that comes in, any study, any statistic, is going to be filtered through this belief system that you've built up, that you've grown up with. And if it doesn't fit into that framework, you're going to discredit it, right? So how do we change that framework? A 30-second experience with a dog can be more powerful than presenting hours worth of research and evidence. So while preemption laws are extremely important and have saved tons of lives, we still need that one-on-one grassroots advocacy, the public education, giving people the opportunity to experience something different from what they've been led to believe most of their lives, to question what they've been taught, helping people change that framework. And that's slow work. It is a one-on-one deal. But many hands makes for lighter work, right? So that's where everybody comes in. So that's all I have for us. We may be over time, so I don't know if we want to maybe leave questions for later or take questions now. I'll leave that up to you.
We have a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have a question? Hi.
Hi. I am a prosecutor in Brooklyn, and I prosecuted some animal cruelty cases. And one of the cases was a dog who was thought to be involved in fighting. And she had scars. She was very badly neglected. She was 25 pounds when rescued.
Wow.
After treatment at the ASPCA, she weighed 70 pounds. So she was really
Tripled.
at death's door. She tripled in weight, and it was all muscle. She was, even the ASPCA, well, I was very concerned because when I inquired about, is she available for adoption, the ASPCA individuals that I was talking to at that time, this was 20 years ago, well, she's a very dominant dog, and I wouldn't recommend her in a home with children, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually I ended up adopting her. And she was the absolute sweetest, most mush of a dog. She was very scary looking. She was, as I said, 70 pounds, solid muscle, the Riker's cut with the bulging muscles on her back. But if she saw a child, she fell over on her back, and all she wanted to do was, she could kiss for like 2 hours. But even my neighbors, and I had a home in Montclair, where I could hear like the neighbors saying, oh, dangerous dog. And she never harmed anybody. She was the sweetest, friendliest dog. She had an enormous bark, I have to say. And she sounded scary, but it was just the perception of her appearance that made people react that way. She was the friendliest dog ever. Dogs, but certainly the people. And it was astounding to me that even the ASPCA, where she was being offered for adoption, they couldn't move her because of what they would say to potential adopters. As when I went in as a potential adopter, and I had to say, I'm an experienced dog owner, I don't care. And I can't remember if I had to sign a waiver, but I was just appalled at what I saw even then in his eyes.
Yeah, so the victory dogs who will meet in the champions, it wasn't until that case came along where a lot of the animal welfare organizations started to really, believe in these dogs and believe that they can be rehomed. So they paved the way for so many dogs that have come after them. The Humane Society is the biggest one, I think, that really changed after the victory dog case. So yeah, we've come a long way since then, for sure.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it Best Friends, Animal Society, and
Best Friends
said we'll take every one of them?
Yes.
Because the judges wanted to put them all down without any kind of behavioral assessment.
So they didn't want to put them all down. I think only 1 or 2 ended up having to be put down. So we had Rebecca Huss as the guardian for these dogs, advocating for these dogs. And Best Friends was the one advocating to give them a chance, to just let them be evaluated, just let them have a chance. And they were able to find rescues for all of them and for most of them. Some of them had to stay at the sanctuary. Yeah.
I've been there. There's at least one still.
Did you have a question, Jane?
Yeah, well, I just also, the ASPCA, I think because of their relationship with the U.S. attorney that was prosecuting that case, they also were very instrumental. I mean, Best Friends wanted to get some of the dogs, for all good reasons, but I think ASPCA, as opposed to what they were like 20 years ago, I think they've been very supportive. I think in the 80s, the thing that really was horrible for these is that damn Sports Illustrated cover.
Most dangerous dog or the killer dog, something
that
like
really
that.
Set off of that. But then on the other hand, the other good thing that happened, and I think it was I can't remember exactly, but it was the racial profiling comparison that was in New Yorker magazine. That was really interesting, comparing, the breed discrimination to racial profiling and how baseless that is on both.
Yep. Yeah, it is a good comparison.
When was that article? Like in the 2000 and...
I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It features largely in that recent book, and I'm blanking on the
Bronwyn Dickey's book,
Yes,
Pitbull.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she emphasizes
Yep.
that and
She
expands
does.
it greatly with good backup.
Mhm. Did anyone else have a comment or a question? Okay. Do you want to get to the
Yeah,
phone?
let's get started then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you supposed to do this?
Okay.